Welcome to Orlando Magic Now, our weekly look at the Orlando Magic. I'm Charles King, and I'm thrilled to be joined by the road warrior, Josh Robbins. This is our 10th Orlando Magic Now show, and it's only the second time that Josh has been in town to actually do the show with us. Good to see you.
I'm so happy to be back, and I'm so happy to hear that we now have a theme song, that we now have commercials airing on local cable to promote the show, and
you must have us confused with a different program.
What, we don't have those things?
Not yet. We're still working on it. Maybe in the near future. But we have Josh Robbins.
Yeah, you and the whole world has that, so thank you.
So let's talk about the Magic.
Yes,
and let's talk about how it seems it's been pretty common. The Magic have a little success, and then when we come in here on Mondays to talk about the show, they're coming off of a loss. But a pretty good week all around, considering they won 2 of 3, beat the Knicks and the Rockets before losing to the Heat. But we're up 15 points in the third quarter of that game before surrendering 39 fourth quarter points and losing that game. It was a tough loss.
You know, it's interesting to me. You frame these things so well. I mean, I would like to say in the 2 months I've been away, you've gotten better, but you were always great.
At least I'm holding down the fort.
But you bring up a great point that for the Magic, this was arguably their most painful loss of the season, which is saying something. Because for them, the loss to open the season to Washington was a heartbreaker. Then the loss to Oklahoma City, heartbreaker. Then the loss I thought that hurt them most of all was the loss to the LA Clippers, where they were leading by double-digit points in the fourth quarter in LA. They looked like they were en route to a signature win. And then that fell apart in disastrous fashion. And yet, this game the other night against Miami, in which they were leading at the very outset of the third quarter by 15 points, to hear them tell it, that one hurts most of all. So I found that very interesting. I don't know whether they feel that way because they were at home or because they are so frustrated by losing to the Heat so often. It's now 13 to 14 times. But this really sticks in their craw to a significant degree. And then tonight, they're playing the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that is not a rival of theirs. And yet now, because of the circumstances of what happened 48 hours earlier, it's almost a must-win. It's not quite a must-win, really, of course, but that Heat game puts a tint on all that's going to follow tonight.
Well, some reasons maybe this one hurts a little more early in the year. There were really zero expectations when they lost to the Thunder. Even though the Magic were starting to play better when they lost overtime games to the Rockets and the Clippers, I don't think expectations had ever been at the point where they were on Sunday night or Saturday night when they lost to the Heat. Had the Magic won that game, they would have jumped to 4th place in the Eastern Conference standings, which really doesn't mean anything at this point in the year, but it would show how far the Magic have come after 3 pretty rough seasons.
You're right, and you've just said in a economy of words what would usually takes me 10 minutes to say, and so I don't know why I'm even here, because you speak a lot better than I do. But all true, and they're 17 and 13 now, which is far better than anyone reasonably could have expected. And had they won that game, they would look even better. And that was a game they should have won.
And they've had trouble getting that signature win. I think people believe that the Rockets game was probably the team's best win, a team that was in the Western Conference Finals a year ago. Opportunity to get back-to-back wins like that and let it slip away. And I think we have to make a quick note about the referee admitting the mistake in that game. You wrote about this over the weekend. A late foul, Vucevic on Dwayne Wade, which really was a big call. Dwayne Wade makes 2 free throws to push the lead from 3 points to 5 points with less than a minute to go. The Magic had trouble getting stops, numerous plays where the Heat had scored, and they finally got a stop on that play. So it was a pretty big moment in the game. It
was, although I don't think it was quite as big as fans think it was, or at least the people who follow me on Twitter think it was. So here's how it works. The Magic were down by 3 points with 51 seconds to go. Vucevic challenges a shot by Dwayne Wade, and after the ball was released, they essentially high-fived each other. Now, by accident, but that's how it turned out. Now, according to NBA rules, that that type of contact after the ball has been released on the follow-through is considered incidental. That's how it should have been called. Referee Kevin Scott whistled a foul on Vucevic. Wade makes both free throws, as he usually does. That's why he's a great player. He comes through in big games. They're up 5 instead of up 3, and that really was kind of the dagger to the whole game. As far as how the NBA does it, every single game, every single call, every single non-call within a game is reviewed. With it in New York or Secaucus, someone's basement, I don't know, it's reviewed and shared, of course, with the referees so the referees can improve and so they can be evaluated. In recent years, Adam Silver, who is a big fan of transparency, what he labels as transparency, has those officiating reports, the final 2 minutes of these games, close games, available to the public. So that's what I am referencing. And in that play, in that sheet of the final 2 minutes, there are 7 calls or 7 potential calls listed. That one was the one error, and it hurt the Magic.
Well, clearly that was a fairly big play, and it did impact the game, but not as much as I think the Magic missing 7 of 9 free throws at one point in the second half. The Heat made 22 of 23 free throws in the game, but the big talking point following the loss of the Heat was the defensive slippage is the term that's been used recently. The Magic have really improved this season, hanging their hat on the play of the defense, and over the course of the last couple of weeks, you've seen that defense get, I guess you could say, gradually worse. A couple of league rankings for defense, you see how the Magic have dropped from 5th to 11th in defensive field goal percentage and dropped from 6th in the league to 12th in points allowed per possession, and these drops have all happened really in the last week.
Right, Scott Skiles has said, and he's correct, he cannot recall a steeper decline in 1 week's time than this Magic team. And this is not a minor issue. This is a very significant issue. This is a team that cannot afford to play even average defense. They have to play stellar defense in order for this success that they've had to continue. Let me give let me drop some knowledge on you and our many tens of thousands of viewers. In 4 consecutive games now, the Magic have allowed teams to shoot 49% or higher. 4 consecutive games. How bad is that? Let me tell you how bad it is. That happened a total of only twice during all of Jacques Vaughn's 2.5 seasons. It happened during his first season, 5 consecutive games, and then during his very final season, 4 consecutive games. And to really add even more perspective, those final 4 games during his final season, those happened to be the final 4 games that Jacques Vaughn coached the Magic. And so, no, Scott Skiles, he and his coaches are the primary reason why they've improved. But even Scott Skiles says this is awful. Yeah. It's got to improve.
Very rough trend. And even though that has taken place, it maybe isn't as obvious to everyone because the Magic have played much better on offense and have won some of those games. They've won a handful of these games where they've been playing poor defense, so it kind of hides the fact. But they have jumped from 20th in offensive efficiency to 16th in the last few games. So how do these improvements on offense and the decline on defense kind of correlate in your mind?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that might be the root of the problems. You know, defense is tough, right? Mm-hmm. Difficult. You know, it's, to use a newspaper analogy, it's tough to write a 2,000-word piece. It's a lot more glamorous. Well, this analogy stinks. Let's talk basketball, okay? So defense, stellar defense is tough work. That's why very few teams are good at it. Mm-hmm. You know, if it were easy, all the teams would do it. Offense is the fun part of the game. Defense is the necessary part of the game. So the Magic have risen from 20th to 16th. Their defense has gotten visual. You don't need to be some stat geek looking up a number to see that. They are just simply better on offense. And yet, if the offense is improving, is there a corresponding decline in defense? Well, we can argue about what the reasons are or whether it's true, but there's certainly appears to be, at the bare minimum, a linkage. And I think that they are connected. Evan Fournier said yesterday he thinks they are connected. He was posed the question. He didn't come out and say.
So they're playing a little better, making more shots on offense. They feel maybe they don't have to dig down as deep on defense. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is what I'm saying. But it may even be more subtle than that. It may be that if you're putting even more energy on offense, you have a corresponding dip in energy on defense. We can debate the point. Perhaps tonight they'll suddenly hold the Pelicans to 42% shooting and shoot 46%. Who knows? But as Skiles has said, if one thing really is linked to another, then the Magic are in trouble, because then they don't realize really what wins games. It's possible that they don't realize what wins games.
Well, we'll talk about the Pelicans game tonight and some of the other games this week in just a couple of moments. But before we do that, let's talk about some of the individual players for the Magic who are either trending up or trending down in recent games. Nick Vucevic has been playing great offensively lately. Only had 10 field goals or more 3 times in the first 25 games of the year. Now 5 straight games with 10 or more, averaging 23 points and 9.5 rebounds a game.
True, and he's giving them a safety valve on all these pick and pop plays where he's hitting mid-range baskets, kind of eliminating these droughts that the Magic have sometimes been prone to. And as we're watching these great Orlando Sentinel photographs on your screen taken by such great professionals like Ricardo Buxeda, Stephen Dowell, it should serve as a reminder that Vucevic now has a few go-to moves. There have been several hook shots that he's made late in games. A hook shot over Robin Lopez, the good Lopez, against the Knicks. The good defensive Lopez, I should say.
Right.
Arguably saved that game for them in Madison Square Garden a week ago today. So he's improved. But I don't think that there's one area where he has improved more than his passing. Against Miami, 6 assists, 1 shy of his career high, and that is now starting to become the norm for him, high assist games. He's a talented guy on the offensive end of the ball, and his assist numbers reflect that, and his mid-range shooting numbers reflect that.
Evan Fournier has been playing better as well. Maybe you could argue he's starting to come out of that December slump. He scored 7 points or less in 5 of 7 games in the middle of the month, and now averaging almost 16 points per game over the last 4 and shooting 40% from 3 in those games. So Evan Fournier playing a little bit better offensively, at least.
All true, and the question is, why did he struggle? Certainly his struggles corresponded with his switch in the starting lineup, the move that sent him from small forward to shooting guard, and it's strange that he struggled then, because shooting guard is his more natural position, and yet the decline in minutes that occurred as a result, I think it played a little bit with his thinking there. I think he pressed a little too much. Now he seems to be doing a better job of making smart basketball plays rather than getting his shots, and I think that's made a tremendous difference for him.
It's not always the case, and I haven't really looked at what his matchups were after the position change, but when you move from shooting guard or small forward to shooting guard, typically you have a little bit more athletic, a little bit faster guy guarding you as well, so perhaps that contributed. And you mentioned the lineup changes. Victor Oladipo went to the bench a couple of weeks ago, and that seemed to work out great in the immediate, where Oladipo had 2 or 3 really good games in a row, but since then has been very inconsistent, up and down. And over the last 4 games, Oladipo averaging just 6 points per game, 9 of 35 from the field, even had an 0 game in there at one point.
Yes, the Magic need both Fournier and Oladipo to produce, because this is not a team where they can rely on just one guy or even 2 stars. I mean, they certainly don't have 2 superstars. They don't have one. And so they need to win with balance, and they need to have their 2 shooting guards to score and to be productive. However, Oladipo really has been the team's best all-around defender. Scott Skiles has said so, has actually lobbied for Oladipo to be recognized as a first-team caliber all-NBA defender. The irony is, less than 12 hours after that groundbreaking article by the Orlando Sentinel came out.
He had a rough half against Corver.
He had a very rough half against Corver in which he in an attempt to help on defense, actually left Corver. Corver hit some threes, including a crucial three late in the game. So, yes, Victor's play has dipped a little bit recently, and he needs to become more aggressive attacking the hoop rather than settling for jumpers.
Fans have to be excited over the last couple of games to see Mario Hezonja getting more minutes. In fact, played more minutes than Victor Oladipo, which might have been the first time that's happened this year. 20 minutes against the Miami Heat. And Hezonja had only made 5 field goals in one game this year, and that was against the 76ers before making 5 shots in 2 of the last 3 games. Still, I think a long ways to go for Hezonja on defense, and still a very young player, but starting to get a little bit more time, playing with the second team now. I think C.J. Watson's absence has really helped in him getting more minutes, and hit some pretty I don't know how to describe them, tough shots against the Miami Heat.
He's a gifted offensive player in just about every area of the game. He is gifted offensively, although I haven't seen him beat opponents off the dribble, which has surprised me, but that's almost a quibble. On a team that lacks shooting except from its bigs, he is he and Fournier are the perimeter players who can knock down shots consistently, and he's hitting. Allow me to glance at my notes here because
upwards of 40.
Because I'm not as smooth as you are at reading from my note sheet, because you are a true professional and I'm just a visitor here. He's hitting 43% of his 3-pointers. I mean, I don't care if you're a rookie. I don't care if you're Del Curry. I don't care if you're Steph Curry. 43% of your threes, that's a lot of threes.
Yep.
And now, can he sustain that if he's averaging 25 minutes a game? Well, at some point for the Magic, he will be averaging 25 to 30 minutes a game. Now, it might happen next year or the year after that. But guys who can shoot like that don't stay on the bench for very long, which at the same time really says just how badly he's struggling on defense, because for all this talk about Skiles being unwilling to play rookie, that's just false. He put in any player who could help them win games. The issue with Hezonja really is that he does not defend well.
Yeah.
And he's got to improve on that area to earn more minutes.
The toughest thing when you look at rookies across the league, I think people tend to compare rookies to other rookies in the same class during that year. And so Hezonja has been not really discussed as much, but a lot of the other high lottery picks, I think you would have to, maybe not D'Angelo Russell, but the other high lottery picks have really gone into situations that really work for them. A lot has been made about Porzingis and the way that he's played for the Knicks this year, but it's a role that, the Knicks were going to play him regardless. He was going to get the minutes, and I think it's a role that suits him immediately. It's a much different case for Hezonja coming in with the Magic, a team that has struggled for so long, is trying to win, and has a pretty deep roster overall.
Well, yes, and he's coming into a position where they've got that's the position where they have their most talent. The wing spots, Oladipo, Fournier, Aaron Gordon, Tobias Harris, of course. Now that the whole issue with Hezonja, aside from his defense, that really cut into his playing time was the move of Tobias Harris from power forward to small forward. It just added to the log jam, and the decision by the coaching staff to actually attempt to play Hezonja at not so much a point guard spot, but an offensive initiator spot.
Yeah.
It's an intriguing one, and the reason why they did it is because he is such a good shooter. They need his shooting on the floor. Fascinating that you mentioned this comparisons of rookies, because just today, ESPN Insider published a piece in which all the rookies were compared to each other in terms of potential. Kevin Pelton, someone who I respect enormously, and I forget who his co-author is, basically didn't even have Hezonja in the top 6 or 7 most impactful rookies down the road, or at least so far based on what they've accomplished, what they might accomplish in the future. I think that's very much wrong. I think that ultimately, if he can get his defensive issues, if he can just become an average defensive player, I think he can become an all-star. Yeah.
Well, if you know anything about the NBA, is that things can change in an instant, and the way this roster has changed so much already under Skiles. There's no telling how things are going to go throughout the rest of the year, and God forbid, but injuries could also play a part in his playing time. All right, let's talk about this week's games. The Magic have 4 games. I think you would have to call this a tough week for the Magic overall, especially on the back half of the week. But tonight against the Pelicans, New Orleans is 10-20 on the season, but I think you could say they've stabilized a little bit lately. In their last 10 games, been playing a little better. Won 3 of 4, beat the Rockets on Saturday, battled the Heat on Christmas Day. So this is a Pelicans team that is playing better than the team the Magic beat the kickoff the season.
You're right, and once again, you make another stellar point. I don't know why I'm sitting here in this seat.
To make better points.
No. I mean, if only the Orlando Sentinel had 2 of you, you could be talking to yourself, and the ratings for this show would be even more astronomically great than they are.
Skyrocket.
Yes. Well, yes. Anyway, I guess the real ratings we should be talking about are offensive and defensive ratings, really.
And New Orleans ranks 29th in defensive rating.
What a segue! What a segue! A true pro. All right, jokes aside, I apologize. But any game in which Anthony Davis is playing and is healthy is a dangerous game for the opponent. And Anthony Davis went 3 for 12 against the Magic in the game on November 3rd, the game the Magic won 103-94 in New Orleans. He's probably not going to shoot 3 for 12 again, but he might block 5 shots again. I mean, he's that stellar a player, and I think once he and Alvin Gentry really start to get on the same page, that he'll be even better. But they are now healthier than they were then. Tyreke Evans playing now. Omer Asik, who's given the Magic tons of problems over the years for other teams.
He's healthier.
Healthy. I mean, he'll play. I mean, he didn't play the last time. So this is going to be a difficult game for the Magic, one they can easily lose.
Something has to give. The Magic rank 8th in the NBA in points in the paint. The Pelicans are among the league's best at defending the paint over the last 10 games. So curious to see how that goes. But the Magic have won 10 of 14 games at home this year. So I think the Magic will be favored, but it definitely is a dangerous game. And then the Magic then turn around and play the Brooklyn Nets, who the Nets have the 3rd worst record in the NBA. They're 8-22. Yeah. The Nets had beaten the Magic 4 straight games before the Magic went to Brooklyn and won just a couple of weeks ago. But this, kind of a dangerous game. Hopefully the Magic don't overlook this one.
Well, for once, for the first time all show, you said something I disagree with.
Okay. I like conflict. It's good.
Well, come on. How can you and I, we're such good pals. How can we?
So
but let's not mince words here. You're wrong. I'm right.
What do you disagree with?
Well, the Nets are a terrible team. Look, by NBA standards, they're a bad team. And what I was surprised by was the ease with which the Magic went up to Brooklyn, a place where they had never won before. I think it was, 2 weeks ago today, and put a hurting on Brooklyn. And Brooklyn just is having real problems. And that's look, let's not mince words. This is a game the Magic should win.
But it does fit the trap game in that the Magic will follow up with games against the Wizards, who have dominated the Magic, and then the Cavaliers. So it's easy to kind of overlook this type of game when it's sandwiched between better opponents.
Without question, yes. We are in agreement there. But, if you're going to be a playoff team in the NBA, there are certain games that you have to win, and you have to win your games against a bottom-of-5 NBA team. And look, that's the way the Brooklyn Nets viewed the Magic for 3 successive years. And they often beat the Magic, and that's how the Nets were good enough to make the playoffs. Good teams have to beat bad teams. And this year, the Brooklyn Nets, I hate to say it, they're an awful team.
And credit to the Magic. These are the games they didn't win the past 3 years, or didn't win enough of. And this year, the Magic have done a really good job of winning games against teams, as Brian Schmitz would call it, in their weight class. So this is where they fared well. Where they have not fared well is against the Washington Wizards, who have won 10 in a row against the Magic. Is that the longest streak of any team against the Magic, off the top of your head,
I believe it is the longest streak, Charles. I think it is.
It makes sense because 10 in a row is a lot.
I think it is. It was before. We disagree. I disagree with the esteemed Mr. Schmitz about what the signature win of the season was for the Magic. I think the signature win was beating what was a previously undefeated Toronto Raptors team in Orlando, because the Magic, I think, had lost 12 straight games to the Raptors.
Okay.
Now, I hope our many hundreds of viewers will send in corrections to 633 North Orange Avenue if I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. And I think that was the signature game. Now, what were we talking about in the first place? Oh, about the Wizards.
Wizards, yeah.
Well, you're right. Magic had played, just cannot seem to get over the hump against the Wizards. Earlier this year, they lost by 1 point here in Orlando. John Wall just shredded them down the stretch, totally shredded. Otto Porter, who you see in that yet another magnificent photo, shredded the Magic. And then a short while later, Orlando goes into Washington, struggles down the stretch. Talking about closing games, the Magic just don't close games well against the Washington Wizards. They've been outclassed.
Well, a big part of the problem, I think, against the Wizards, and Scott Skiles talked about it following the loss to the Heat. Part of the defensive problems is allowing point guard penetration, the drive and kick, and there's not a whole lot of players better at it than John Wall. And I think in the prior games against the Wizards, John Wall has gotten into the middle of the defense, drawn help, kicked to the corners for threes, and it'll be interesting to see if the Magic can kind of change that, because the prior two games, it was very clear that they had no answer for that.
There's not a single thing I could say that would add to. I mean, you said it perfectly.
So
yeah.
The Wizards have had a disastrous season, though, overall. I mean, a team believed to contend in the East, sitting at 500 outside of a playoff spot, but has won 4 straight entering this week.
Yeah, may I riff on this, actually?
Yeah.
Because it is an interesting point you make. The Wizards should be much better than they are. And here is a case where a team is not playing to its proper strengths. They moved to the so-called pace and space model before the season. Well, it doesn't make sense to me. What works for the Golden State Warriors doesn't necessarily work for every team in the league.
Especially when you replace Paul Pierce with Otto Porter, who's shooting below 30% from 3.
Well, that's a good point, and your point your point is valid. But what I was really thinking was, the Wizards have two of the best, arguably the best big man combo in the Eastern Conference, and they're not properly playing to those strengths. They should have Gortat and Nene on the floor at the same time as much as humanly possible. That's the strength. Yes, Wall's great. Beal is a superb outside shooter, but the Wizards are playing away from what really separates them from most of the teams in the East. Does not make sense to me. Not every system can be fit to your personnel. You have to base your system on your personnel, and I fault Randy Whitman for that, or I fault Ernie Grunfeld, wherever this directive came from the Wizards. It's not working.
Well, let's talk about.
But working enough to beat the Magic.
Yeah, it works just fine so far against Orlando, 2-0 this
Yes.
year. And another team that's 2-0 against the Magic this year, the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's hard to believe the Magic play Cleveland for the 3rd time already before the new year. Is it before the new year? No, it's January.
It would be January 2nd.
Okay.
Yes.
So both times the Magic have played Cleveland, both games have gone very bad. 14-point loss in November, and then tied for the 2nd worst home loss in history against Cleveland on December 11th. That was an embarrassing one. And the team actually didn't have Kyrie Irving, and he's back now. So how do you see this going? It's not a really good matchup for the Magic. It's too bad the Magic couldn't get Cleveland following the Christmas Day game against the Warriors like Portland did.
Well, it certainly would help any team out east if the Cavaliers had to fly back the night to play a double, second game of back-to-back, flying from Oakland all the way to Orlando. That would be a benefit for Orlando, right?
Sure.
Well, again, jokes aside, really the two of the games this year that really just showed how truly brilliant and I do mean the word brilliant, is of how brilliant LeBron James is, his fantastic off-the-charts basketball IQ, those games against the Magic. I mean, he just shredded the Magic with smart passes. He posted up when he should have posted up. He took advantage of mismatches when he needed to. He found open guys on the perimeter.
And those guys hit shots when he did. That's
correct. And all this talk for Steph Curry being the best all-around player in the NBA, well, if LeBron James, if Tad Carper and B.J. Evans, the PR directors for the Cavaliers, wanted to boost LeBron's totals, they'd get the video from those games against the Magic in front of the voters, because those games were all about LeBron. He was the one who sparked it all, and they were the two most lopsided losses the Magic have suffered all year.
It's a big week for the Magic. I think, considering it's been a good year, better than most people expected. The Magic are at a point right now where, like we've talked about today, having some defensive slippage. Can they get things corrected going into a week that's going to be pretty challenging with the Pelicans team that is playing better and concluding with a Wizards team they've lost 10 in a row to, and a Cleveland team that has blown them out twice. Couple or three losses this week, you could see them completely plummet in the Eastern Conference standings. A couple of wins, they could rise near the top. That's the thing about the East right now. It's so balanced. Only a couple of games separates maybe the 3rd seed from the 13th seed right now.
True. To quote Scott Skiles yesterday at practice, you go on a 5-game losing streak, which at the moment the Magic are not in danger of doing. If you go on a 5-game losing streak in the Eastern Conference this season, it's deadly. And those are the words he used, and he's right. So if the Magic don't solve this defensive issue, and it is an issue, I see too many fans on Twitter saying, oh, it's not a big deal. Well, it's a big deal. So if they don't solve it, they're going to wind up losing more games than they win. And what has been a promising season to this point for them will start to fade away.
Will you be here next Monday?
Well, let me look at my trusty schedule.
Josh has now been here 2 times in 10 shows.
No, at this time next week, I will be holed up in the Matt Dobeck media room at the Palace of Auburn Hills, hacking away, getting my an early edition of the Notebook done.
For Detroit.
Yeah, I'll be up there getting ready for the Magic's game against the Pistons, which will, a week from now, will be 4 hours away.
I kind of saw that coming, but we were happy to have you here today, Josh, for show number 2 with the Road Warrior, Josh Robbins. We appreciate you watching Orlando News Now. A reminder, the Magic play the Pelicans tonight at home, and we'll be back next Monday to talk about the Magic like we do every week, just minus Josh Robbins. We'll probably have Brian Schmitz here.
Yes, oh, he's good. He's good.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.